Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Captive Audience. Your host, Don Anderson, this evening. Looking forward to another night of, having a solo conversation with you all tonight because this is one of those evenings where Leslie is traveling. So you only have me to contend with tonight. So be prepared for a monologue. I'll try to keep the pace lively and not too fast. And I hope you enjoy this evening's monologue. Please feel free to comment as usual on the chat line so they know that you're there and I can bounce back and forth with you along the way. Having said that, let me just launch into this evening's monologue. So, one thing I like to start with, and maybe this is a good idea for all of these podcasts, is that you all grab a pen. I think a pen is a really good thing to have in a hand because I'd like you to be able to scribble down ideas so that you can use these in conversations that you're having every day. Because if you're not able to use these things, it's one thing to educate yourself, but it's quite another to be able to turn around and use the information that you gain here to share ideas with others. And the best way to do that is to have a pen handy and take notes. Because one of the things I'd like you all to do, hey, Lori, glad to hear you out there. One of the things I'd like you all to be able to do is to practice what I call the art of secular apologetics, which basically means you're going to recognize that everything starts from morality. I mean, everything starts with a moral argument if you think about it. The minute you wake up in the morning, you're thinking about what you should do and what you can do. And so that's morality. Every rule, every regulation, every law that we have is based on morality. So that moral code pretty much infuses everything that you'll do. So just a few thoughts just to kind of set up tonight's dialogue. Or monologue. So let me just hop into that monologue. And what I'd like to start with, and I'm going to highlight this and push it out there so that you all can see this article. Bear with me one moment. And we touched on this, I think, last week, but with the assassination that occurred and so many other things going on, I didn't think we gave this the amount of time that it really warranted. And this is the article that speaks to a Democrat senator from Virginia, Senator Kaine, who calls himself Catholic anyway, who basically shocked his listeners a couple of weeks ago when he declared that it was extremely troubling to say that rights come from God rather than the government. So this person's actually making the argument that rights come from the government, that they don't come from God. Now, if there's anything that's more foundational, more fundamental to the founding of this country, is that the rights that we have are given to us by God. In the Declaration of Independence, those famous words of Jefferson were, all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So endowed by the Creator, not us, not the government, but God. And this is the thing that makes America different from any other country that's ever existed in the history of the world. I think right now, at the moment, there's only one other country, and I think it's Israel, that makes the same claim that we are not subjects. And this is one of the things that makes us different from Great Britain or the British Commonwealth or any of the other so-called democracies around the world. They are subjects. They belong to the government, which means the government, what the government gives, the government can take away. But we are not subjects in the United States. We are citizens, which means the government works for us, we the people. And this is we take it for granted, but it's a fundamental distinction. And once we lose that distinction, we are essentially slaves. And that's what the Democrat Party is all about. Basically, it was founded on keeping men slaves, and now it wants to enslave us once again. But I've kind of left my script a little bit with that. So a little more information on that. This is one of the reasons why the left hates religion. They hate religion and everything that religion stands for, because the left is all about government control. And for the government to have 100% control, you have to be subjects. You have to be slaves. Every dictatorship starts with the destroying of religion. Every revolution essentially starts with the destroying of religion. Lenin, Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler, Chairman Mao, Fidel Castro, it always and everywhere starts the same. All major 20th century revolutions started that way. Bolshevik Revolution, French Revolution, one of the first things they do is they shut down the churches, they slaughter the priests, and then they start going after everybody else because the morality has to be dictated by the government, not we the people. In fact, we all remember Lenin's famous statement, religion is the opiate of the people. I would turn that on his head and say, that this is not original. I got this from someone else. Communism is essentially the religion of the malcontent. And just look at who you see in the streets screaming and crying and yelling all the time. These people are seriously malcontent. And what motivates them? What motivates them is envy, because they want something that somebody else has. They think that's the primary motivation for existence, is to get stuff they don't have. And anger, because they can't get that stuff or don't know the formula for getting that stuff. And then anger leads to murder, because the one thing these people can't do is reason. They've lost the capacity to reason because the font and the source of reason is God. You remove God from the equation, you eventually will go insane. And if you don't believe that, just take a look at the common discourse that we see out in the general public. You can't win an argument with reason, so you then resort to murder. And that is a great segue into this event we just experienced, and that is the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So, just a couple of thoughts on that. Initial grief for me, I know for you all personally as well, followed by massive anger. And then that is quite natural to slide into that very human desire for revenge. But that's not what we want to do. As easy as it would be to give into that, that's not the reaction that we want to take. And there's a whole lot of moral reasons why we don't want to do that. But from a strategic, I'm going to speak strictly to the strategic reasons. And the strategic reason is, let the left show us who they really are. That's what we want them to do. If we come back at them with a bunch of negative energy and a bunch of we want to get you back type energy, then we're playing the game, the same game they're playing. We're playing the unprincipled game. We want to stay principled in our response. And the best thing to do is let the public see who they are. Because the general undecided public, I'm convinced, that still has rational thought. Once they see that and see that response, the less likely they are to vote for them. It's literally the unmasking of who the left truly is. For the last I think one of the great things that Trump has accomplished, he caused them to pull off their mask and show us who they really are. So they really are about murdering. It's not just abortion the first trimester, it's abortion after the baby comes out of the womb, for example. That's how unhinged they are. They're out here defending this recent assassination, saying that it was Kirk's fault, for example. The average American is going to be horrified by that. I look back, and I'm old enough, I don't remember when JFK was assassinated, but I do remember when RFK, MLK were murdered. There was a national outpouring of grief by everyone on both sides of the aisle. No prominent person was out there trying to, justify those murders. Even when Governor Wallace, for those of you who remember, Governor Wallace was shot. So he was a Democrat governor of Alabama who literally stood in the schoolhouse steps to prevent blacks from attending the University of Alabama. There were no prominent people saying that the shooting of Governor Wallace was justified. No civil rights people, no black leadership. In spite of this guy saying those infamous words, what was it? Segregation yesterday, says segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. You can't think of a more heinous political figure from the mid-'60s than Governor Wallace. And yet when he was shot, there was no one out there calling for his death or saying he deserved it or any of those kinds of things. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what's changed in the last 60 years in the public discourse, in the political environment in which we live, that this massive change has happened, where you have public figures basically trying to justify literally assassination of someone based on just their executing on their freedom of speech. And as near as I can tell, what's changed is we've gotten away from that moral code. If you go back to the 60s, you had a situation where something like 90% of children were raised in a two-parent home amongst white Americans. I think it was like 85%, 80% of blacks were raised in two-parent homes. You look at the disaster that's occurred in the last 60 years, where now only, I think, 60%, so 40% are raised without a dad in the house amongst the general population. And amongst the black population in the inner cities, is like 85% are raised without a dad in the home. Which means, of course, you don't have any church going on, because if you did, you wouldn't be doing that. And you look at the disasters that have occurred since then, a complete unhinging and unmooring from executing around the moral code that we so take for granted. So this is where the radical left has taken us. They've done a lot more than just assassinate Charlie Kirk. They basically shot every one of us. So, and this is the thing about it, good can come from terrible things. This has ignited conversations and conversions in his death that we never would have seen before. A couple of things that have occurred. Governor of California, the mayor of LA, for example, refusing to lower the flags to half staff. People are watching that. As outrageous as that might seem to us who are already conservative and get it, the general population is looking at that and thinking, How unhinged can you possibly be to deny lowering the flag to half staff for an assassination of someone? A regular citizen, by the way, not a politician. That is simply unhinged, and the majority of the population will see that and then move more towards the conservative. That's a good thing for us. Their progenitors, and I think you have to include the likes of the assassin who killed Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth, the assassin who killed him, Judas Iscariot, the worst murderers of all time. Those people created in the result, as a result of their assassinations, the greatest country in the history of the world was able to consolidate and become that because of the actions of Democrat John Wilkes Booth. Christianity was able to become the greatest and the largest religion in the history of the world. Somewhere in the neighborhood around 4 billion people on the planet claim Christianity as their faith because of the crime of Judas Iscariot. So what we have to remember is that ideas can't be shot, they can't be hung, they can't be lynched, they can't be burned at the stake, they can't be beheaded. Ideas are like our Lord and Savior. They're like him. They reside outside time and space. And as we say in the Glory Be, they are true in the beginning, they are true now, and they ever shall be true. And there's nothing that any man can do to destroy truth. And so there is my opening monologue. I'm going to stop and just see if there's any commentary around that. That is the thinking. I think that is the strategy. I think one of the refreshing things that's come out of all of this is that we finally have a recognition that we're at war. And this is a war of ideas. It's not, it's first and foremost a war of ideas. Americans are used to conventional war, or what I'll call kinetic war, or what we'll call shooting wars. We're used to the Allies versus the I can't remember now the name of the German, the other side of the coin. We're used to those kinds of wars. So Great Britain, France, Russia, the United States versus Germany, Japan, Italy. Those are the kinds of wars we're used to. That's a World War II style war. This is not that kind of a conflict. This is asymmetrical war. It's a war on all fronts. And last thing that you really want to do in an asymmetrical war, if you're the enemy, is go to shooting. That's the last resort. You primarily want to win around all kinds of other things. So they're going to attack us in the realm of the cultural, in the realm of the of the religious, in the realm of the political. They're going to try to destroy all of those institutions that cause the country to come together so that they can win and take the country apart that way. And the Democrat Party has essentially declared war against the Republic. It ain't the first time. I'll use these words in italics again. Remember, this is the party that declared war in 1860 to keep human beings as slaves. That's their legacy. And if there ever was a time I'd like you to pull your pen out and write these things down, because these are the kinds of things you need to share, and they're easy to retain if you keep them in chronological order, the things that party, the crimes that party has committed against humanity. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. Never forget, the Democrat Party started the Civil War in order to keep black slaves. That party invented Jim Crow in order to keep blacks from voting. That party invented the KKK to keep blacks living in fear. That party cursed Republican President Theodore Roosevelt for having Booker T. Washington be the first black man to have dinner with him at the White House. Republican Theodore Roosevelt, I might add. They did that. This party forced Eisenhower to send federal troops because the Democrat governor, Faubus, I believe was his name, in Arkansas, wouldn't let students attend Little Rock High School back in 1954. This is the party of Governor Wallace, Democrat governor of Alabama, who literally stood in the schoolhouse door to prevent blacks from attending the University of Alabama. He who was also famous for the infamous speech, segregation yesterday, segregation today, segregation forever. That's this party's legacy. This is the party that funds Planned Parenthood, an organization that basically has almost its foundational principle to slaughter as many human weeds, as they call them. That'd be primarily black and brown babies, but hey, white people who are poor as well. They want to slaughter them as well. That is their objective. This is the party that takes police from your neighborhood with the objective of destroying safety in those neighborhoods. And we see that in every single blue city across the country, and then fights an effort by the current administration to bring peace to those places. These are the things that you almost need to like memorize as lines that you could use in any kind of a conversation that you have, because the vast majority of the population doesn't know this stuff. They still think of the Civil War as a war between the states, or they think of it as North versus South. No, no, we need to change the language. That was a war between the Democrat South and Republican North. Democrat South in favor of keeping slavery, Republican North in favor of getting rid of it. And it didn't stop when that war ended in 1865, and they are back at it again. A couple more thoughts from Vance. I thought he had a great speech talking about, he called it the list of disunity, right? And a recognition that we are at war with the other side. There can be no unity, just to give a few quotes from him, from people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There can be no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There can be no unity with people who harass an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a friend. No unity with people who celebrate the assassination of Charlie Kirk. No unity with people who fund terrorist sympathizers. That's where we are. And I don't know how else to say it, other than the recognition that that's the game that we're in. We're at war with the forces of evil. And right now it's a verbal war, and we need to keep it there. And the more that we speak out, the less likely this is to spin into something far worse. But having said all of that, I remain positive because we just let people see who these people are. The more they take off their mask, the more we're going to see what they're really about. And this country is still good enough to come to the right side of the equation, and that is definitely happening. So, a couple of other thoughts. Um, and I think Trump's done an excellent job of keeping them on their toes. He's filed a $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. And let me just give you that article as well, if I can get this to put this in the chat line here. And this is a good thing because it keeps them on the defense. And I think basically what it's doing is it's giving folks in local geographies the template for how you fight the radical left. There can be no compromise. There can be no meeting them halfway, because for them there is no halfway. If they hit you, then you have to hit them back. Now, I'm not talking about physical force. I'm talking about use the principled weapons that are at your disposal. You look at all the lawsuits they filed against Trump, and those lawsuits were, well, all of them were just unsubstantiated. When they do something, the other side does stuff that is clearly substantiated, then we need to come back at them with the same weapons they come back to us. And this is one thing conservatives have been soft on for too long. One of the things I like best about this particular administration is they are fighters. And I'm so glad to see you get slandered, then you file that suit. And Trump has already won a number of these. I think ABC News and Stephanopoulos basically settled for $15 million and a formal apology for the lies that he told. There was, of course, I think it was ABC and that scandalous thing that they did with regard to the interview with Kamala Harris, and they wound up paying out a lot of money. Corporations hate paying out money. So you put them in positions where they'll think twice before they say and do these things. That's a great strategy. Moving to the local area. And I think this is one of the most interesting things I've seen in a while. And it caused me to laugh because, the sadness of it all, you have to find humor in this stuff. And that is this. So Oregon, as you know, faces an attendance crisis with people attending their public schools. And in this case, this article that you'll see in the chat line is about truancy in, I think it's Salem Unified. So Kaiser, that's in the Salem area. But this sort of thing is happening all over the place. So here's some of the logic they give in the newspaper. They never get to the real reason. They just stick on this superficial stuff. So they're facing this attendance crisis. More than a third of students are missing more than 3.5 weeks every school year. Standardized test scores are like plummeting. They're blaming it on this lack of attendance. Oregon's at the bottom of the nation in terms of school attendance, like 50 out of 50, like the worst. And the reason that they're upset, and what they're saying they're upset about, is that the school district, that is, they need more truancy officers. Now, I think this whole thing is hilarious. Step back and think about this for a minute. Let's say you had a business and you weren't getting enough sales. Would your response be to find out why your customers are not buying your product, to find out why they're not using your service? Or would your response be to call the police and go knock on the doors and arrest the customers for not using your business? Only the government would do something like that. But that is the response, basically, of this school district. Have teachers go knock on doors to see why they're not in school. Here's the thing. Could it be that people aren't in school because your product stinks? Could it be that the market knows that going to school is worthless? Could it be that they're better off doing something else with their time other than going to school? The answer to all of those questions is probably a big giant yes. You'd be better off sitting at home watching cartoons all day than going to a lot of these schools. And and people know this. The only way to fix the public school system, I don't think there's anything that you can do to fix it because the thing is filled with Marxists. So the only solution to this is to give it competition. People who don't send their kids to public school should be able to take their money and go someplace else, whether it be raising it at home and doing it themselves, which I'm a huge advocate of, or taking that money and giving it to a private school or some other school that actually has to respond to the parents and deliver a high caliber product. That's the only way the public school is going to improve. Nothing else except for incentives is going to cause it to change. And that's what it needs. It needs a healthy dose of competition. Hopefully, we'll see more states taking up the cause of vouchers for the sake of increasing the opportunity for parents to select the best possible educational approach for their kids, because public school clearly isn't it. And when you see responses like this to why they're doing bad, instead of focusing on what the true issue is, the horrible product you're offering, they're going to go knock on doors and try to get people, drag them out of school for the criminal offense of not using their product. You have to laugh. Only government. Switching gears real quick to crime. I saw, and because of what happened with the assassination, this got kind of blocked out in the news, but I think this is one of the greatest decisions ever. So I understand the National Guard, so Trump sent the National Guard to Memphis. And I think this is absolutely a brilliant strategy because although Memphis is a Democrat city, it is run by a Republican governor. And so, of course, it's the governors who make this request and accept this. The mayors have no say-so in this. So these are the states that want to help. Let's go get success in those cities. So find those blue cities that are in red states, run by Republican governors, and go there first. So before you go to the Los Angeleses and the San Franciscos and the Portlands and the Seattles, go to the states that have Republican governorship and get those cleaned up. And once people see that, they'll look and say, I want some of that for me. People are already saying that about what's happening in Washington, D.C. But you go to some place like Memphis and get that cleaned up, and you just go one at a time, that's going to be an awesome thing. And speaking of Memphis, this is one of those cities that has one of the highest violent property crime rates in the United States. It's got the third highest murder rate. The city's logged over 150 murders in 2025. That rate is about 4 times higher than Mexico City and 27 times higher than Havana, Cuba. It's pretty horrible. And I understand Jackson, Mississippi is pretty much the same way. East St. Louis has been a nightmare for about 50 years. So there's tons of cities that you can go to. I love this strategy of going to Republican governor states and finding blue cities in those states, which would be any blue city, and implementing this strategy there. So I think that's just brilliant. And a couple other things here on defense. So let's see. This is pretty obvious, but I'll send this to you. So Defense Secretary Hegseth confirms that Chinese engineers will no longer be working on the Department of Defense's Microsoft services. Now, the first thing you got to ask yourself when you see that is, you think, what? Duh. I mean, the Chinese have been working on defense systems and anything. What in the world are we thinking? This is like letting your biggest number one enemy work on your systems, your ship's combat systems. This would be like letting Tojo in World War II design the battleships that the Americans are going to use in the high seas. It's absolutely insane, but that's what we've been doing, and glad to see that is coming to a stop. Then there was this boat strike, which I think is also an excellent thing. So the Trump administration, in case you hadn't heard this, is actually striking back at the cartels. And this is brilliant because essentially we're able to declare that they are a terrorist threat. And as a result, they can be attacked just as if they were a foreign adversary. So it's fantastic that they're doing this, because if you think about the effect of this, I don't know how many, thousands, maybe it's hundreds of thousands of Americans, young people, have died in the streets due to fentanyl overdose. This is definitely a crisis. Think of it this way, just from a military strategic perspective, not even thinking about the morality point of this. Um, you send in those drugs and you're wiping out military aged young people at a time when our birth rate replacement rate is below 2.1. 2.1 is the number of children a woman has to have in order for the country to replace its population. We're at around 1.7 or something, right? Don't think for a second that our biggest adversaries aren't aware of that. The less number of kids that we have, the more vulnerable we become as a country. And this is precisely one of the reasons why they're doing this. So it is outstanding that we're taking military action, because, in effect, that's a military action in a country that's become a narco state, which is precisely what Mexico's become. I don't know that that president has any power to do anything. Even if she wanted to, I can't blame her. But you can imagine that if she takes the wrong positions, those cartels will literally take her out of office. And it might be well, figuratively or literally, that's how things operate there. So this is indeed a very good thing. And I'd be remiss, if speaking on the crime thing, if I didn't stop for a moment about what's going on in Multnomah County, because if it's Multnomah County, it probably ain't good. So we'll put that in here. So this is the sort of thing that just blows your mind. I was just cruising the news the other day. I just put the article in the chat line. In a recent crackdown on illicit drug activities in Multnomah County, they made a bust in Northeast Portland, netted 9 pounds of methamphetamine, a kilo of fentanyl, and $40,000 in cash. I mean, that is like just a huge amount. And that's just one bust in one part of Portland. Um, I hate to say it, but you can't make it up. Another reason why we need to have these crime fighting teams come to Portland pronto. I mean, pronto. So there, sports fans, I've almost got no voice without a partner to bounce these things back and forth with. I tend to get gassed after 30 minutes. But any thoughts or comments before I close this out? Hopefully you've had your pen, you've been working and taking notes. But let me close by saying this. Um, as bad as it feels right now, as terrible as it feels right now, we're in a very positive place. That assassination has awakened a ton of people who were still in Slumberville to realizing that we are facing a existential crisis, and it's time for us all to wake up. And as much as I hate to see that happen, it wiped me out for like a week, to be honest. Um, but at the end of the day, through evil acts, God finds ways to bring about great good. The crucifixion is one such event. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was another such event. And at the end of the day, we win if we stay focused on the right things. So thank you all for joining me tonight and putting up with this solo operation, and looking forward to seeing you all next